This week on The Right Side, is Canada showing early signs of a financial crisis? The Alberta PCs choose unity, while the BC Conservatives have no leadership, and you'll see what the Canadian forces are up to now. This is The Right Side, Episode 8, recorded Saturday, March 18th, 2017. Strong and head-scratching leadership. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of The Right Side, recorded today, Saturday, March 18th, 2017. Your usual co-hosts are here, Shane and Patrick.
Hello everyone.
We do have a good selection of news for you guys this week. Hopefully you guys have had an enjoyable week and have made great gains in whatever endeavors you are venturing out in. And we hope to just have a little bit of time shared with you to share the right news of the week, and that is, of course, here what we like to do at The Right Side. Cut down on the sensationalism and bias that you often find in the mainstream media. So, without further ado, I think we can jump right on into our first story. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
All right, so our first story is titled, Bank for International Settlements says Canada is showing early warning signs of a financial crisis. So the article goes on to say that Canada has been flagged by a global banking body for vulnerabilities tied to credit, property prices, and the prospect of rising interest rates. In a quarterly review published this past Monday, the Bank for International Settlements, or BIS, said that Canada is among jurisdictions showing early warning indicators for financial crises and domestic banking risks. The report also measures credit and housing prices relative to GDP and the ability to service debt in the event of rising interest rates. The report said debt service ratios are at manageable levels for most countries provided there are no change to interest rates. However, Canada is flagged alongside China and Turkey as countries that face potential risks under more stressed conditions that assume a 250 basis point increase in rates. The debt service ratio to Canada would jump from 7.9 to 3.6 in such a scenario, according to the BIS report. That's the second highest among 22 countries measured, lagging only behind China. The report notes that two-thirds of banking crises were preceded by credit-to-GDP gaps that breached the 10% threshold during the 3 years before the event. Much of the debate around Canada's buoyant housing market has centered on the growing amount of Canadian household debt, questions about the ability of consumers to handle their overall debt burdens if and when the interest rates rise from prolonged lows. All right, so normally we think of Canada as a beacon of financial stability and financial success, but these are some troubling warning signs here, specifically relating to the housing market.
Yeah, I agree. And something else that a lot of economists and people in business have noted is that the low amount of the Canadian dollar has also been hurting the economy quite a bit, especially with the downturn in the energy sector and the oil sectors.
Right. And of course, all of this is linked through the power of economics because, you know, if we have a lower Canadian dollar, that ultimately means that our purchasing power isn't as strong abroad, and that kind of trickles down into the domestic front with interest rates. Now, anyone who's been following interest rates have only crept up very, very slightly since the 2008 financial crisis, and that's almost 10 years ago. So interest rates really haven't gone up. Unless something major happens, I don't think they're likely to go down, so the only place they can really go is up. Now, while this affects housing markets and individuals on one hand, it also affects our governments, the governments that like to borrow and spend because they need to pay interest just like the rest of us do. And because of that, that just means that we're going to be spending more to service that debt when interest rates do inevitably rise, when we could be spending that on other things like programs and services that people want, should we have not been borrowing. So that's one side of it. But I think what's also alarming is the housing market. specifically Vancouver and Toronto.
Yeah, especially the Vancouver market and increasingly Toronto and other areas of the country too, such as other parts of BC, in Ottawa, and even in some places in between the country. They're really rising out of control, and a lot of people are not even able to buy a house. They're having to settle for a lot less. And I think one thing where this is happening, where the BC government has been trying to combat foreign purchasers by taxing them for when they buy a house and to provide tax credits for first-time homeowner buyers. So there's certain ways that governments are trying to do this, but I'm not really sure if it's something that government can actually accomplish and to try and reverse the market, because and a lot of people will see it as just meddling in something that they can't really do anything about.
Right. And, I mean, you can either do two things here. You can either decrease the price of the houses, or you can increase the purchasing power of the people that want to purchase these houses. And you do the second by increasing the ultimate growth of the economy, increasing wages and whatnot. Unfortunately, the first one, aside from taxes, is, of course, accomplished by this housing bubble. And if you look at the article here provided by the Financial Post, you will see that the graphs provided for Canada, when compared to the U.S. prior to their housing market collapse in 2007, are starting to look a little bit similar. Not strikingly similar, but just a little bit similar. So it's definitely something I think that the federal government and the banking agencies need to be on the lookout for. And I was quite shocked when I didn't really hear any mention of this this week. I think primarily because this kind of story isn't really going to jump out at people unless you're inside one of those hot housing markets like Vancouver or Toronto.
Or if you're subscribed to business magazines,
right,
or read, say, the Financial Post, which is primarily a business newspaper, or if you're in the industry as well, because a lot of people will look at, the buzzwords such as credit or property prices or interest rates, and their mind will just gloss right over it. But really, it is quite important, especially to the everyman, because of how much of an impact it'll have on their lives.
Yeah. And, the government really doesn't have many tools in their tool chest for solving this, because raising interest rates done by the banks, that would make the problem worse. You can't lower the interest rates because that would make those two economies go even faster. So, unless there wants to be some sort of housing tax in these markets or credits for people, depending on who's purchasing, that's something to look at. But I'm not even fully convinced myself that the situation in Vancouver is driven entirely by foreign investors.
No, I don't think it is too. I think a lot of it is driven by Vancouver just being a really nice place to live, and there's a lot of opportunities there for people in, say, the technology sector or a lot of other sectors such as service, because Vancouver, of course, is a very gigantic city in Canada, and a lot of people do go there from other parts of the province just for work and jobs, and a lot of young people move there, especially away from Victoria, where it seems like there's not as much opportunity.
Right. And, I think if we were to look at two practical things governments could do at all levels, and that would be to just get more money in the people's pockets through lower taxes and ensuring that they manage their fiscal house, and that they're not going to be spending huge amounts of money on debt servicing for when these rates inevitably go up.
And to also try and make more incentive for businesses to further the economy, because more money in people's pockets is ultimately a good thing.
Of course. All right, so we're going to stick in BC now for this next story. What do you got?
All right, so the BC Conservatives have been shut out of the upcoming televised debate, was the headline that screamed across the Globe and Mail the other day. The BC Conservative Party is heading into the next provincial election in May without a leader and without a spot in the televised leadership debate, but is still hoping to gain vote percentage in a race that is dominated by Premier Christy Clark's Liberals and the opposition NDP led by John Horgan. So last fall, the party, which doesn't have any seats in the BC legislature, removed Vanderhoof businessman Dan Brooks as leader because his candidacy for the leadership was approved at a party meeting that lacked quorum. They didn't actually mention what the quorum was, but they just said it wasn't valid.
And to clarify for anyone out there wondering, a quorum is what's necessary for a governing body or gathering group to have decision-making power.
Yeah, it's basically the minimum number of people that are needed to make a decision. For instance, in the House of Commons, the minimum quorum that you can have to pass any bill is only 20 MPs. Very interesting, eh? So this quorum must have been fairly low to begin with, from what I'm thinking, and they still weren't able to meet it, which really goes to show what the situation is in the BC Conservative Party. But still, the Conservatives are forging on into electoral battle in a couple months here, hoping to have 40 candidates for the 47 seats and to reach voters through social media, touting what party communications and policy director John Twigg calls captivating policy ideas to be unveiled during the campaign. We haven't heard anything from them at all. I mean, this is the first thing I've heard. So, I mean, the campaign's almost over. It's like a month and a half, month and 2 months left. And we haven't really heard very much out of them. So as a bit of background here, the Conservatives, who have not won a seat in the legislature since 1986, ended up with 4.8% of the vote in 2013 when they had a familiar name as leader, which was then former Tory MP John Cummins. In the run-up to the campaign, they had one seat held by former Liberal cabinet minister John Van Dongen, who left his party. Mr. Cummins was at the podium during the debate, making the case for the Conservatives against the leaders of the Liberals, NDP, and the BC Green Party. John Twigg said questions over political fundraising in the province, which led Elections BC to refer to the issue to the RCMP for an investigation, may create an opening for the Conservatives as voters look away from the Liberals, who have borne the brunt of criticism over the issue. 8 weeks from now, who knows what that will look like. It's not inconceivable that the Liberals break down, which could create new opportunities for the BC Conservative Party, Twigg said. He was asked about party finances for fighting a campaign. He said, "I'd have to phone the treasurer, and he probably wouldn't tell me." Still, he conceded the party does not have a lot of money.
You know, this whole situation really reeks of a lack of organization. The fact you only have 40 out of 87 candidates nominated, and that, you know, the leader, in quotes right now, would have to phone the treasurer to see what kind of money was in the bank, and they probably wouldn't be able to figure that out. So I guess my question as an outsider on this story is, why are the BC Conservatives even wanting to contest this when, I mean, just from reading the facts here, they are not in the shape to contest.
Mm-hmm. What they're trying to do is, I think they're trying to raise their own profile just through social media, and they're trying to be there, right? There's a lot of people in, for example, in the federal conservative race that have no hope of winning the race whatsoever, but I think they're just there to try and raise their own personal profile. And that's, I think, what's happening here with the BC Conservatives, because they have no hope in winning a seat. They have no hope of probably even getting to the 40 candidates out of the 87 seats, which is not even enough to win, even if they did manage to elect all of them.
You could win a minority government.
They could, but it's not likely to happen. I think what the biggest problem for the BC Conservatives is that the BC Liberal Party isn't your typical Liberal Party. They're not centrist. They're probably more center-right. And this is because back when the Social Credit Party kind of disbanded and they fell apart, much like the federal PC Conservative Party did back around the same time, I think what happened there is that the NDP came to power, and a lot of the other parties were looking at it in the 90s, and they said, we can't let the NDP back in. We need to join up so that they don't do so. And so basically the BC Liberal Party is a coalition of a lot of those old progressive conservatives as well as centrist liberals. So the BC Conservative Party is really fighting against their own ideologues
Right,
in the
and
Liberal Party.
do they not see that?
They don't. I don't think they do. I think the ones that are trying to fight for the BC don't see that, and they don't realize that by fighting over them, they're not creating opportunities for themselves. They're creating opportunities for the NDP.
Indeed.
And that's who's going to be
Indeed.
the winner if they try and fight.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we would like BC to have, a true free enterprise conservative party, the Liberals are the best fit for that right now because they are the best position to block the NDP. It's a question of A leads to B results in C. And that's the equation that's set up for this coming election and has been for a long time, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the BC Liberals have been in power for 16 years now, and they've got a lot of detractors, and a lot of people don't like them. But the problem is that they don't realize that if the Liberals don't win, the NDP are going to win.
Yep.
The Greens are just a step above the BC Conservatives in the point that they do have candidates and they do have a bit more financing, but they really have not much hope in winning. I mean, they won their first seat in the last election, which their leader, Andrew Weaver, won here in Victoria in Oak Bay, and he was a former UVic professor. So, I mean, it's not like the Greens have much chance either. So they're only really taking away some of the vote from the NDP, who would probably win a majority if neither of those existed. So wow. If it was just up to the NDP and the Liberals, the NDP would probably win every time. And the Liberals only get in due to vote splitting. So the Liberals have to stay united for them to even have a chance at winning another majority. And a lot of people don't like Christy Clark for some reason. I'm not sure if it's just because
she's been around a long
policies. Time. She's been around since Gordon Campbell resigned after bringing in the harmonized sales tax. But she's not really that popular of a leader because she took her party to the last election and won a majority, but she lost her own seat, and she had to get someone to resign in their own riding in Kelowna to be able to sit in the legislature. Now, what does that tell you when a party wins a majority and the leader can't even win their own seat?
It's a reflection on the other options that are available at the time.
It really is. They're saying, we don't like the Liberals, but we like the NDP even less, but we really don't like your leader, so we're not going to vote for them. So really, BC politics is very interesting always, and it's just, you can't really compare it to very many other places in the country just because of how strange and weird it is. But we're going to have to see in the upcoming weeks here what's going to happen. And the BC Conservatives, their lack of disorganization, I think, is I don't think fighting it is really going to help them here.
No. All right. Well, as we see in BC, that you can have a party that is really disliked and you have an option that everyone coalesces around. That's what we're trying to create here at Alberta, and a step was taken to that this weekend. Today, on Saturday, just before recording this, Jason Kenney has won the Alberta PC leadership race. And this is what started as a unity tour last September in a blue truck, touring around the province, and ended with the result of Jason Kenney being elected the leader of the Alberta Progressive Conservatives. The PCs first came to power in 1971 and held power until 2015 when the NDP were elected. And this election was not even close. Jason Kenney won with 1,113 votes, Richard Starkey had 323, and Byron Nelson had 40 votes, for I believe what is a grand total of around 1,470 or so, give or take, 1,476. So you can tell that there was a clear mandate here for unity. And we've heard many times before that the PC party reinvents itself in order to maintain relevance, and it's always worked. You saw it under Ralph Klein, Ed Stelmach, and Alison Redford to mixed results, and then the last time they tried that was with Danielle Smith and Jim Prentice when they tried the forced merger with the Wild Rose 4 months before the last election, which, of course, we know the result of. So I think what that ultimately led to was the utter collapse of the progressive conservatives from the conservative side, while the progressive wing of the party was just sick of it. And that's ultimately what caused the election of the NDP. So no one knows exactly how successful these unity talks will be, but it seems to be that it's going to be a likely folding of the PCs into a single conservative party, whether that's a new party or the Wild Rose, hopefully in time for the 2019 election. And after the results today, Brian Jean has already indicated that Wild Rose is ready to talk merger and has extended a meeting invitation on Monday to Jason Kenney. So things are already getting underway here in Alberta for that, much the same way where you guys have a united opposition against the NDP. That's what we're trying to create here in Alberta, and we took a step towards that this weekend. So there's a lot of us here who are hoping that that will ultimately be successful.
Yeah, I think in BC it's always been a possibility of the NDP winning, but I think in Alberta no one would have predicted it. Even just five years ago, people wouldn't have said NDP winning in Alberta. You're crazy. But now they've realized it is actually a possibility, and you can't have vote splitting even among the most right wing of the province of the country, because it just causes bad news. And with Kenney winning, I did the math here, and he won with over 75% of the vote on the first ballot. So clearly he was the major choice for a majority of the party. And I think his message of unity probably speaks to a lot of voters that are looking for an alternative to the NDP, but are also looking to say we don't really want to fight amongst each other when the PCs and the Wild Rose are not even that far apart ideologically. They want to unify and defeat the NDP.
Yeah, and I mean, he just has the experience for it, because first things first, he was involved in the creation of the Conservative Party of Canada on the Canadian Alliance side of things back in 2003. So this is going to be similar, although not the same. And he's also got, international experience in holding high ministerial portfolios in the last federal government. So, you can, as the media and the NDP will like to in this election, brand the new party as, the party for racists and whatnot. They're going to have a hard time doing that for Jason Kenney, given his record in the Conservative Party under the immigration portfolio in particular. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens and what the narrative ultimately becomes on this. So
yeah, and we'll just have to see how the talks will go after this, and ultimately we'll have to see how this impacts provincial politics in Alberta.
Yeah, and another thing that's going to be up for debate is how fast is this going to go? Is it going to be done by the end of the summer? Will it be done by the end of the year? So those are the kind of things we're looking for next, and it's definitely going to be an interesting time going forward. So the PC party definitely made the right decision this weekend. All right. So, firing line time. What do you got for us?
All right, so this week I found an article that said Canadian military is to review their uniform, badges, and ceremonies to ensure it is welcoming to women and minorities.
Can I just take a pause here for a moment and highlight the other... I'm looking for a specific word here. It's not hypocrisy, but the fact that the publication in question, which we'll highlight at the end of the story here, would say that uniforms, badges, and ceremonies need to feel welcoming to women and minorities. The first thing that comes to mind with that is that the military is often in faraway lands, and you don't care if the person next to you is a woman or a minority. As long as the job is getting done and you're working as a team, that's what counts.
Mm-hmm. Also, to group in women with minorities is kind of interesting, because women do constitute more than 50% of the Canadian population. In the military, it's much less, but they do have separate uniforms for women because, just women's bodies are different than men's, and the sizes are different. So, I mean, it's automatically going to be different. So we're going to... Through the article, we're just going to have to see what they consider it to be welcoming to women and minorities. So, from the article, it said the Canadian military will review its badges, uniforms, flags, and associated ceremonial activities to ensure they are welcoming to women, visible minorities, the disabled, Indigenous people, and members of the gay and transgender communities. The plan includes a detailed list of initiatives the forces can take to accommodate those members, among them, quote, review current dress, badges, flags, music, lineages, affiliations, drill, and ceremonial, and ensure these customs complement and expand towards a more diverse and inclusive national military institution. And the quote here is to allow dress appropriate to one's gender identity. Consider family circumstances when posting CAF members, including, if possible, geographic proximity to family for cultural reasons when requested, and to dedicate a room at the workplace where CAF members feel encouraged and not at risk to practice their religion. Other initiatives to be considered involve examining military equipment and infrastructure to, quote, accommodate the needs of designated group members and other members with specific needs, end quote, and ways to improve healthcare and family support for the various individuals, which would include, quote, traditional healing, spiritual needs, specific accommodations, and dietary needs.
You know,
I don't know about you, but I'm just blinking having read all that.
Yeah, and
it really just stuns you.
When you are dealing with a population that's diverse, like Canada's is, this kind of review is not something that is ultimately, thought of as needing to be adjusted, because how long has this institution existed, and what is the point of this? Because I think, in general, the idea behind the Canadian Forces is that you're there to serve. It's not necessarily about feeling inclusive and making sure that every little need is met. Sure, of course, there are limitations to that, but this just seems like it's bending over backwards.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't even know why they would even call them ceremonies if they're planning on changing them, because ceremonies are something that is done because it is ceremonial and it's part of the tradition. But if you change it, it's not really part of a tradition anymore.
Exactly.
And things like music, why would the music need to be changed? That just reeks of
Are we going to be policing for microaggressions in the mess hall now?
Exactly. Like, I don't know if this is needed, and I think a point you made earlier is very valid. A lot of the Canadian Forces, sure, they may be guarding us at home and doing a very awesome job at it, but a lot of them are being posted to faraway lands, such as the Middle East,
Ukraine in the winter.
Yeah. I'm not sure how much this is going to impact people, or how much the people signing up for the forces even really want it. I don't personally know anyone in the military, but
Canadian Forces aren't racist.
I would definitely have to find someone and talk to them about what they think about this and if it's needed.
I'm just left scratching my head at this, and I think it's time to reveal where this came from, because you might be thinking, oh, this is from the CBC or it's from Rabble, but where's it from?
It's from the National Post. Which is seen as probably one of the more right-wing newspaper publications in Canada, and I think we're both left scratching our heads again.
That is a reason why. I am just speechless for this story, because
I think we both are. Like previous firing lines, we've been able to talk about it, and we've been able to.
This is something I would expect to see on a university campus.
Exactly. This is something you'd expect to see in, you know, say the NDP or the Green Party, like as you said, liberal arts
And I
universities.
got
But the
another
Canadian
another
military,
point to make. The current Minister of Defense is Harjit Sajjan, who was a soldier himself in Afghanistan. And
and
quite a
also a
decorated one
visible
at that.
minority.
Exactly.
So this isn't even like this isn't even political. It's not something the federal government is wanting them to do. This is the Canadian military itself doing it. So I'm not sure if this is something that they should be spending their resources on. I think we're both speechless on
It's
this.
not. It's not. And quite honestly, I mean, there's better things to be spending it on when you have such a huge budgetary deficit, and we, are at 1.1% of spending of GDP when NATO mandates we be around 2%.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so to continue on this episode of The Right Side, in order to prevent the speechlessness from continuing, we're going to move on to Word of the Week. And the Word of the Week is leadership, which, as defined by the New Oxford American Dictionary, is the action of leading a group of people or an organization with different styles of leadership. So we've seen leadership, of course, today in the new PC party with Jason Kenney taking hold, leadership in the Wild Rose with Brian Jean extending his arm out to Jason Kenney to get the unification process underway. We are, however, seeing a lack of leadership this week in the BC Conservative Party, and maybe by, I'd say, the media and the government on addressing the issue of our growing debt to GDP ratios and increasing household debt in Canada. So this week, leadership really made sense to have as the word of the week, because we saw examples of leadership and examples of lacking leadership, and I'm not even sure what to call the firing line segment, if that's leadership or lack of leadership.
It's certainly an interesting kind of leadership. We can all agree on that.
All right. Well, I mean, we do intend to keep things serious here on The Right Side, but, I mean, there are times when one is left speechless, and that is where I'm at right now, and I think you are too. So I think we can pretty much wrap this episode of The Right Side up. I don't think there's anything else left to bring up. Are you good?
I think we're all good, except we might be, thinking a little bit more on this after the fact.
Alrighty then. Well, if you want to find full show notes and more, that's available at rightsidenews.ca. We're also on Twitter at Facebook at rightsideca, and you can subscribe on iTunes at rightsidenews.ca/iTunes. Thank you for sharing your time with us, everyone, and we'll be back next week.